Sachi. I'm the writer, director, slash producer of British Ghanaians Lost in Translation. What it is for me, it's a passion project, and so it began at my passion for Ghanaian languages, namely Twi, and so what the documentary is it's an investigative documentary. It's investigating why British Ghanaians can't speak their Ghanaian languages fluently. And there's numerous reasons for that. The documentary encapsulates a lot of the stories, but it follows Otis Dealey, the presenter on Channel 5 Gadget Show. He goes on to interview a lot of successful British Ghanaians. We've got Jeanette Kwakye, there is Arnold Safa-Kantanka, there is Denta Amwateng, Lord Paul Boateng. There's a number of successful British Ghanaians, and quite a few of them can't speak their mother tongue, as it were, fluently. And so the documentary, goes through and just looks at why this is happening, and also highlights a very strong issue that the reality is, if this does continue to perpetuate, that British Ghanaians could actually lose touch with their languages and their culture, the cultural history and their cultural heritage. Smallest towns in places like Ecuador and South America, in Australia it's happened. There's been a number of cases where different communities are losing their languages down the generations, and they're now trying to retrace them. They're going, let's try and find some sort of materials like tapes, videos, or anything that we can use to capture the language. But my case for this documentary was that while we can, while our elder generation are still alive with us, let's try and grasp the language and connect. What was happening in working in this industry was I would meet a lot of British Ghanaian people that were working in the media and doing well for themselves, and it was just became because I couldn't speak the language, basically. I was intrigued by others that couldn't also, so I that would be one of my first questions. I'd be like, oh, hello, I'd try and speak a bit of Twi with them, like, well, who to say, and then I'd realise that they were stilted in the conversation as much as I was, and I'd be like, well, what's your story? And that became my thing. Whenever I'd meet a British Ghanaian, I would ask them, why can't you speak the language? And I heard so many different stories. And so that kind of, when I was commissioned by OTV to produce a documentary mainly on Ghana, on a Ghanaian subject, that was the first thing that came to mind. It's also a thing where I hope life imitates art, because I am on a journey of learning the language, and I have been on it for some time now. So doing this documentary, it's sharing a bit of my I guess it's an insecurity because I can't speak it, and so by doing this, I'm pushing myself. I'm saying, do you know what? I can't just have a documentary like investigating other people. I'm sharing that this is my story too. I need to do something about it so that I don't become a statistic or part of the problem in generations to come. So my journey in learning Twi, which is the Twi that my mother speaks, she's Brong Hafo. So speaking Brong Twi is it's an interesting journey. When I first started telling my mother that I wanted to really learn it, she kind of laughed. And then I was like, no, I'm really serious. She laughed some more. And then I was like, okay, no, seriously. What it was when we were kids, I'm the youngest sibling. I'm youngest of three children. And she spoke it to my eldest brother. The middle one, she'd pretty much settled in the UK and was speaking little bits here and there. By the time I was born, the working situation had changed. So a lot of the time, my mum and my dad were working, and when they came home, they would just be speaking English, or they'd speak Twi to each other. So I picked up like very little, and so I always had it in the back of my mind when I was younger. I was intrigued by the sounds. I was like, I'm going to learn it one day, and I was that kind of child that I would set myself to do something, and I would do it, and I'd just do it independently. And so there was actually a time when I was about 7 or 8, I'd get all my mum's old High Life tape cassettes and listen to them and try and phonetically remember what the words were to these songs. And my mum, like, you know, was very like intrigued by this, and she was really excited, like, wow, you really want to learn it. But, you know, for whatever reasons, she didn't take the time to really, you know, get me to learn it. And so now every week I sit with her and we learn new vocabulary, and new ways of saying things, how one would say it, because she speaks Ashanti Tree as well, so she'd tell me how the Ashantis would say it. She also knows a bit of Fanti Tree, she knows a little bit of Ga, but we're focusing on Brong Tree and Ashanti Tree, and so I'm getting there. I'm a lot more educated on it than I was maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. But I believe kakra, I will get there. Baku, I will get there. And so yeah, it's good. It's going good, and I just need to keep pushing at it. That's a very interesting and complex, you know, thing. I think on one hand, what I've found by talking to other Ghanaians and different generations of Ghanaians is that there is this, I don't know if it's unhealthy, in some respects it is, because the language isn't getting passed down, but it's this respect for English and Englishness and Britishness. It's like, oh my gosh, Englishness is so amazing that, you know, it's the done thing. You have to learn English to get somewhere in life, and these kind of mindsets are passed down, and I think that's one thing that really stunts the continuing on of languages, and does something to someone when you're young and you're in a house where English is the preferred language, even when you know it's not necessarily your parents' first language. It does something to you, because then you're like, well, that language is for them, but it's better for me not to know it now, or not to know it at all. I'm going to do English, and that's what they taught me. And then I go to school, and with my friends we speak English, and then, you know, all that I know is just Englishness, and but then there's also this other side which is again is confusing, because on the same side, you know, on the other side of the coin, you'll get the same generation or people saying, oh, you know what, it'd be great if our children could speak English. I mean, could speak Tree or speak Ga or Fanti Tree or whatever. And so, you know, people get confused, kids get confused, like, do you want me to be Ghanaian, or do you want me to be English? And when do I switch it off? When do I switch it on? Which one? Who am I today? And that's the issues that arise with cultural duality. It's like, okay, language is so integral to your cultural, you know, your cultural awareness, your cultural heritage, your cultural identity. But if you're getting mixed signals, like it comes to a point when you're just like, well, all right, I'll just speak English because it's easier. And what I found again by talking to the younger generations, like my generation of British Ghanaians, is that it just wasn't cool to be Ghanaian, to speak a Ghanaian language, mainly depending on where they went to school. If they went to school with a lot of other different cultures, then being African even wasn't something that, you know, people looked upon with pride, or and so it was like, oh, your language sounds funny. And even I encountered that. You know, mum would be at the school gates or something, and there will always be someone that will be mocking an African accent, and I don't know, but I think as a lot of our generation have grown up and we've grown more aware, we've become more proud, and we want to learn our language now. So, you know, I think it's a case of, okay, the past is in the past. Whatever has happened. We are in this situation now. There are places where it didn't happen, you know, where Ghanaian communities were a community. I think that's one of the other issues, is that we're not always a community. When we hear something Ghanaian, oh yeah, I'll support it, but we're not really, you know, sometimes we don't really support one another. And so there are areas where there are Ghanaian communities in that sense. There's a strong community in the essence of the word. There's a lot of togetherness. We do everything together. We meet in each other's houses. We come together. We go to church together. We go to a Ghanaian church. And there are places where the language can continue and grow, and the children, it's normal for them to be British and speaking English in school and come home and speak Twi or Fanti or Ga or whatever. But in areas where there's not a strong sense of Ghanaian community, you don't have that. That's where I grew up anyway, where there's a whole mix of different cultures, and our parents wanted to fit in, and so they would speak English with the neighbours and everyone else, and with us. And so I think that's one of the problems. And other communities, our cultural counterparts, so Arabic-speaking families and communities, Indian, Chinese, other European cultures, they get it. They have a strong sense of community. They'll come over to England. This is who we are. We're going to set up here. We're going to go to a Polish school. We're going to go to this school. We're going to speak our language, and you're going to learn, and you're going to know it. But when you go out, you can speak English, and it won't confuse you. So, like I said, it's very complex, and there's a lot of different elements to it. And I've only touched the surface of a few of them, but I think that's why we struggle in terms of us not speaking it.